Hi, love leaders. It's Dr. Shanon Roberts, your host for the Love Leading Podcast, where we discuss how to create connection in your most important relationship that God designed, bringing health and sometimes healing while deepening intimacy. Welcome to the show. And this is a perception. Where do you fall with being safe and secure mentally? Where do you fall? Feeling safe and secure physically. And listen, that's the continuum from just the natural rhythms of physical comfort, non-sexual affection, all the way through the gamut of sexual expression and sexual intimacy. And where do you fall in the safety and security of how you feel spiritually? And don't look over your partner's shoulder if they're answering their questions separately from you, because what I am going to ask is that somehow you guys share what your numbers are. And listen, the us answers between those two are going to be the average between the two, because there's one side of a crime scene and then there's another side of the crime scene. But what matters most is that when we put those two sides of those eyewitnesses into our summary report, it's somewhere in the middle. It includes both and both matter. And if this tends to be an area of great discrepancy, I'm going to ask that only curious questions be asked in the discussion with no responses. Okay, so you gave this a 2. Help me understand. Curious question, remember, are to understand, not to be understood. Help me understand why our emotional security is 2. And then we'll flip the switch. Okay, well, you gave us a 4. Help me understand why you feel that our emotional safety and security is a 4, because now we're at a 3 as an us, right? And then as we get into the action steps, the next questions are going to be, how can I help you come from a 2 to a 3? How can I help you move from a 4 to a 5? Listen, I don't know very many 5s out there, so please stay encouraged. We all always are in the process of growth. We are all always on this continuum of feeling the pulse in every area. We can't hit 5s on every level all the time. This is just the ones that we're going to identify for this year and how we're going to get there and what our action plan is together. So take a moment as you finish up marking your numbers and comparing notes. Told you this was going to be a work in progress. All right. Moving on. I want to get you out of here in enough time to do your action steps and your homework. So if our relationship is based on safety and security, because that's the thing that deepens and grows the intimacy and the intimate bond with one another, what causes the erosion of this bond? Listen, I don't know very many people that show up and say, I do, thinking that they don't want a happily ever after. And some of the reason why I got into this work is I'm like going, what happens? You know, I have these couples that show up as pre-engaged couples, or I have these couples that come in that are doing their premarital preparation, and they show up with these rose-colored glasses on, They are just sitting right next to each other on the couch, and they're finishing each other's sentences, and they just seem so in love. Like they can't even imagine a day that's going to go by that they're not going to want to show up and just do everything possible to make their partner happy. And I know that my job is to kind of clean off those rose-colored glasses, help them come down to a little bit of reality that they really are going to have some bumps in the road, some pain points in the relationship, some conflict management, challenges, all of those things that we know as seasoned couples. If you're out there, you premarital couples, stay encouraged. That doesn't mean that you won't learn how to navigate those. In fact, premarital preparation is actually a prevention, and the statistics are really high that if you do that work way ahead of time before you develop these unhealthy habits, that you can even reduce the divorce risk by 25%. So that's just a plug. Stay encouraged. But I also know that I also see couples on the other end of this continuum, sometimes at the most severe hour, maybe a betrayal discovery, maybe after separation, maybe the last ditch effort before the attorneys have already been contacted, the papers have been drawn up, and is all we need is a signature on the dotted line. I mean, I see them all the way through the continuum, and those couples, and I'm not saying you guys are those, but they do walk in a little differently than those premaritals. They walk in maybe staggered. Maybe they don't even come in the same car. They don't even want to like sit next to each other in the lobby. They come in and they sit on opposite sides of my couch, and they're not even looking at each other, and you sometimes can just cut the tension with a knife. And I think to myself, okay, my job is to remind them how in love they were from the very beginning, and that the possibility of having those same kinds of romantic and passionate feelings do come back. And so I always am like intrigued, like what happens between point A and point B. And I'm about to tell you. Here are some of the things that I have discovered in my experience and in my research that really kind of erode that intimate bond and that close connection from the very beginning. Things that tend to do that is basically one, inattention. We quit being intentional about showing up. We get lazy, we get busy, we even maybe not even think that it's a thing to continue to work on a relationship. You think it's a one-time thing. I picked you, you picked me, I said I do until death do us part, and so we're done, right? But in all reality, we are growing people mentally, emotionally, obviously physically and spiritually. So we move and grow and change, we evolve. And so when we are not doing that together, then sometimes we end up in parallel lanes. We are doing life beside each other, not with each other, or we let the urgent of our life just take over. We get into our careers, we get into our parenting stage, and all of those urgent or sometimes more prioritized things drown out the things that are necessary for us to nurture that bond with one another. Secondly, hurt wounds. We don't address those pain points in the relationship. They get swept under the rug, or we move on never expressing them. We don't know how to really navigate some healing conversations. And so we gather these kinds of trigger sets that continue to kind of resurface or come back up over and over again, and we don't know how to address them. Or we have these attachment wounds. Like, what's that, Dr. Shannon? What is an attachment wound? Well, the way that we tend to attach with significant relationships is influenced a lot of times by our early attachment relationships from our parents or from other, significant relationships that we've had. And that's sometimes influenced by a securely attached way of presenting and sometimes not. Sometimes there's this insecure attachment influences. And so we have areas of sensitivities and vulnerabilities that have sometimes nothing to do with the relationship, but in that, relationship, they show up. And sometimes couples will even, call them out and weaponize them against each other. Well, you're so sensitive, or you got daddy issues, or you got mommy issues, or, whatever, right? And so we'll use it against each other, not knowing how to handle and care and nurture those with tenderness. And so attachment wounds, not knowing how to dance around those areas of sensitivities and vulnerabilities that each person has in their own kind of strengths and challenges in their personalities. Listen, I'll be honest with you. We all have them. We all have these areas of sensitivities, and maybe at a time, at a very vulnerable moment, we might have disclosed what we know to be true of ours, or maybe we don't even know what they are. And then maybe they've been used against you in the future. So these tend to erode that bond. And then the last but not least is our negative argument cycle. And I have said it from day one. If you've known me, you've heard me say it. It's not that we fight, it's how we fight. That's the most important thing. Actually, disagreements can be a very productive and healthy thing in a relationship. In fact, studies and research say that if there is this negative argument cycle, that it is the number one predictor of erosion of intimacy. It's the number one predictor of creating relationship dissatisfaction. And unfortunately, unaddressed, it's the number one predictor of divorce. And so that's the reason why I'm going to spend a lot of time here when we go through some of these things. So moving on. So inattention. Do you have a time or a pattern of check-ins with one another? Do you have block times that you are able to have dedicated, prioritized, undistracted, mental and emotional preparation for discussions? Do you have shared household management opportunities? I call them business meetings. Because listen, let's be honest, you running your life is a small business. If you have children, you have employees. If you have a home or car, you have asset management. If you have, income coming in and liabilities going out, then you're running on a budget. So do we have those check-in points? Because how we manage those stressors will overflow into how we are able to manage connection, manage recreation, which we're going to talk about, and so on and so forth. In your betrayal wounds, your hurt wounds, are you bringing closure and healing to offenses as they happen? Are you being healing partners with each other and having healing conversations over these past wounds as they surface? In your attachment wounds, are you remaining sensitive to your partner's areas of vulnerabilities as they come into the relationship? And do you remember what they are even? Does it matter to you? Do you understand that you have the power in the way that you love around those vulnerabilities when they show up to actually help heal them? And in your negative cycle, are you seeing progress of being able to catch that negative cycle in the moment, see it as it comes? And if not, do you make it a priority to circle back around and ask for a redo so that you can both show up differently in it? Do you know how to respond in a safe way in those moments. So let's take a moment to go ahead and rank yourselves from 1 to 5 in those categories. Given the attention as a priority, healing hurts as they happen, being each other's healing partners in areas of vulnerabilities, and decreasing the presence of negative argument cycles. I'm just going to give you a quick moment. Let me see if I can check the chat as you guys are spending your moment answering those questions. Are there any questions in the chat? I can't open it up because I'm sharing my screen. Okay. Yeah, they can type any questions. If you have any questions, those will only be seen by us. Okay. So since I spent a whole lot of time talking about this negative disconnect or this negative fight cycle, it's very important that we go in a little deeper dive of those things that cause erosion. Let's just take a deeper dive just in the way that we fight. So here's a diagram of a typical fight cycle. I know I'm getting really technical, but bear with me. To you guys that have been through my program, this is no surprise, right? You've seen this before, you understand it. Typically, at the very top of this little emblem is a trigger. This can be a look. It can be a word choice. It can be a tone. It can be a circumstance. It can be an event. It can be a person that causes one person in the partnership to say, I'm not so sure about that. That feels somewhat yucky. And so that person begins to make meaning of what that trigger means to them. And they land on a story they tell themselves about that trigger. You're being so, this means that, and sometimes that's a very threatening thought. It could be very accurate or maybe not so much accurate, but it is true in their bodies and the way they're experiencing it in the moment. It is their perceptual truth. And if that story lands on an area of vulnerability, maybe an area of vulnerability from the relationship, they've showed up one more time an hour late without notification. The story I'm telling myself is no matter how many times I ask for there to be at least a notification, whether they show up later on time, they still don't do it. It must mean they just don't care, right? So if that has been historically the case, then this becomes a very sensitive area of topic of conversation and a very sensitive reoccurrence. So they might be feeling primary emotion is that very soft emotion, hurt, unprioritized, right? Rejected. And a lot of times we don't show that primary emotion. We really move into our secondary protective emotion. Maybe we get into that anger, irritation, frustration, or indifference, right? We might ramp up, or we might shut down, or we might move away. Because when we get into that place that we protect our area of vulnerabilities, our bodies respond to emotional threats the same way as physical threats. We fight, flight, or freeze. And so if we perceive our partner to not be available or responsive to what we're saying is important, then that is a hard emotional moment that we're going to protect. And we move into self-protection. And sometimes that means we yell, or we stonewall, or we get busy, but it keeps us disconnected. And so when we respond in our secondary emotion and our action tendencies tend to be prickly, then our partner gets sucker punched too. And now they have their particular way of understanding the story they're telling themselves about you in that moment. Sometimes it hits on their areas of vulnerabilities. They move from their primary emotions, and then there's secondary self-protection emotions, and they have their action tendencies in the mulberry bush. Round and round and round and round we go. So we are then arguing about the cycle and not arguing about the issue, right? So in the scenario, you come home late with no notification. This particular partner is a ramper-upper. I know I'm a ramper-upper. I love you guys. Love you ramper-uppers up there. I get ya. And your partner's like, why are you being so sensitive? My goodness, you're yelling. It's just 5 minutes, right? And so their story is, I didn't have a battery. I was caught in a meeting. Traffic went long. I don't have control of it. Why are they being so impatient and ununderstanding? And so it's their area of vulnerabilities. They seem so controlling. And that means that they do not feel loved or accepted or whatever that is. And their action tendencies is, I can't talk to you when you're like this. You're being unreasonable. And so they shut down and they move away. And this is how we get disconnected when we travel these kinds of unhealthy cycles over and over and over and over and over again. So in these disconnect cycles, here are some things that you might want to understand. How we protest, I don't like this, or ouch, is really important. If we have a harsh escalation, we ramp up quickly, or we don't protest at all. We just want you to see our behaviors so that you'll know that we're not okay. We shut down, we get quiet, or we just remain distant and busy. That's a prickly protest. If we use secondary emotions rather than our vulnerable primary emotions, if we are coming at it from a place of anger or contention or indifference, or instead of hurt or sad or unprioritized. So what we know about these fight cycles and action tendencies is that John Gottman has identified with 99% accuracy that if these 4 things are in your action tendencies in the way that you appear in them, that it's the biggest predictor of divorce. And he calls them the 4 horsemen. They're worth mentioning because if we can predict with that much accuracy and we've narrowed it down to 4, we need to make sure that we don't have those, right? If couples that have in their fight cycle criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, or contempt, those are the 4 that are the biggest damagers to the relationship overall. Meaning, criticism. Are we taking the moment to attack the person or the problem? Defensiveness. Can we receive influence from our partner? If they're saying my perceptual truth or the story that I'm telling myself is a place of their desire to want to give you some feedback, can you receive that? without becoming defensive. Stonewalling. In those times, do we do a punitive silence? Do we go for days before we can regulate and speak again? Are we purposely not allowing hard conversations to happen? And then contempt, just a general disregard of a want to, a desire to want to see those conversations look different, feel different, to want to show up in the relationship and be the best version of myself for my partner. Those are really hard places to come back from. So characteristics of safe and secure connect cycles. So that's the problem. What's the answer, Dr. Shannon? Well, one, when we protest, can we do it with softness, with it being motivated to seek understanding and to seek restoration? Or is it really just about to take out our stress, to get our emotions out, to only have them understand us, to punish? Or is our motives really about being known, seen, heard, understood, and equally interested in finding some kind of navigation of reconnection, problem solving, or work through? The use of primary emotions really important. Instead of going into that protective anger, annoyance, indifference, contempt, irritation, to stay in those more softer, vulnerable emotions like sadness and hurt and being felt alone or rejected or insecure. It's really hard to not have, if you know Brene Brown, her research is impeccable, that if we come in soft, there's a greater opportunity that our partner has the ability to receive it better, has the ability to match us at that level of softness, and equally will show up equally as vulnerable, which provides opportunities of reconnection, problem solving, and work through. And here's some things that you can do in the way that you respond to your partner. You can validate. Instead of picking all the holes into their story apart on how wrong it is, how inaccurate it is, or they shouldn't feel, or whatever, maybe pick out points of agreement first. What are they saying that does make sense to you? Secondly, finding commonality. Listen, you might not always agree on how they got to their logical conclusion with their story, and it might not be so logical to you or rational to you, but you can always agree with understanding what they're feeling, because emotions are a universal language. So even though you might not think they should feel sad, or that they logically made sense of how they got to the place of feeling sad, got it, but you can understand that they are feeling sad, and you know what that's like because you felt sad. And if it matters to you, that makes you sad that they feel sad. And so meeting with a statement of empathy to feel sad sucks, right? We want people to be with us in a moment of that. Soft touch, whether or not, that's a part of your culture or not. It's what we do for our children when we're trying to soothe an upset child. We soothe them with a hug, or just a soft touch with an arm or a leg. You'll have to decide if that's something that is appropriate in your fight cycle. And again, those curious questions to understand better, If we really don't know how they got to that logical place of how they think and feel, then ask questions to understand until you understand. I promise you it's a de-escalator too. Instead of asking questions to prove your point, because curious questions are not to be understood, but to understand, it's asking questions to understand them better. And then asking them, because sometimes we just need to get to that very end of, we need to make sure that we say it all. Ask them, is there anything else you want me to know? And then repair. The art of an apology. Sometimes if it's too early in the process, we get the feeling that you're just saying it really quickly because you want it to be a period on the conversation. So we really have to do some of these other steps to really understand what ownership that we're going to have in it. I'm so sorry that not I'm sorry you, not I didn't mean to, it was never my intention. I'm so sorry that and some people say, well, what if I don't feel like I did anything wrong? Okay, but are you sad and sorry that your partner's feeling this way? Listen, we naturally, if we accidentally step on someone's toe that we don't know on the street, we will automatically say, so sorry. Of course you didn't mean to. But if it matters that you caused some kind of harm, whether you meant to or you agree with it, whether it should have been, they still are. So why wouldn't we want to repair? Reassuring is like a soothing or a calming. If their story is somehow skewed, you don't love me, you don't care for me, I hope you reassure them. I absolutely love and care for you and adore you. Or you might want to reassure with what you're willing to do different next time. And then you have to do it. Because you can get by with saying you're going to do it a few times over and over again, but now they're going to want to believe your behavior and not your words. And then lastly, reaching through the prickly. If your partner is really ramped up or they've really shut down, you're going to want to kind of go and reach through. Hey, it's really important what you're feeling. I'm just having a hard time hearing it like this. Or, hey, I can see that you might be upset with something and it matters to me. And when you're ready, I'm here to hear about it. You might really have to build some kind of bridge. So those are kind of some basics. So take a minute. How are you guys doing in this negative cycle? Rank yourselves 1 to 5. Do you use soft protests through vulnerability and self-disclosure in the way that you bring up areas of issues or areas of ouches? Do you use soft and primary emotions in the way that you emote and or share what you're feeling? Or are they prickly secondary ones? Do you use some of those catch responses that I just went over in the way that you respond to your partner in times of their ouch or protest? 1 to 5. And do you get to a place of closeness and warmth after you move through the disconnect cycle? Do you feel more connected again? Take a minute. Any questions in the chat?
There only you can see the words. You can see it.
Oh,
Yeah. Because they write them to that.
okay. If you're writing your questions, I think I'm the only one that can see them. And as soon as I stop sharing my screen, I'll get to the Q&A part. So feel free as you're thinking about them to type them in the chat, and then I'll get right to them as soon as we get through the workbook. All right. And again, comparing your answers, and remember, a 1 plus a 4 is a 2.5. All right, let's get to the final section. Since we got through the hard one, let's get to the renewal systems. Okay, what are renewal systems, Dr. Shanon? Well, those are the things that couples do that counterbalance the stresses of life and that fight cycle of life. These are the things that promote healthy rhythms that reset closeness. And when we have a good balance of those, it counterbalances stressors and fight cycles. So let's take a look at those. What are the renewal systems? Well, research says, my experience says, that healthy couples have these natural ways of sharing from a place of deeper emotional engagement, that they take the ability to be each other's soft places to fall, that they share from a perspective that it's me and you against the world. They have the ability to carry the thought of one another with each other no matter where they go. So they're making decisions based on the understanding and knowledge of what's important to the other person. And they have the ability to share, like I said, from a place of risk, but with safety and security response. They take time for dating. And the dating isn't just oh, we have a couple of hours all of a sudden. Do you want to go grab a bite to eat? It really is an intentional cutting out. This is beyond that business meeting, because now they have the ability to have taken care of all of the stressors and all of the business of life, so they can just enjoy each other's company. They don't talk about just the kids or the in-laws or those rumor mills of the community. They're really spending time catching up on one another. And it's not a bad thing to have some couples that go along with some of those outings on occasion, but it's not to the detriment of spending just private us time, potentially weekly. And if you can't be out of the house to do that, then you have a night where you're actually turning off screens, or you're intentionally, getting the kids to bed, or you have, ability to have an in-house date. Maybe it is the only time that you watch that Netflix show. Nobody sneaks ahead of the other one. Or maybe you really enjoy researching your vacation for the next time around. Or maybe it's you enjoy playing a game or cooking in the kitchen or learning a new skill set. I don't know what it is, but the us does. And so you figure it out, and you protect that time just like it's any other thing. All the extracurriculars that you get your kids to is just that important. You make it happen somehow. Recreational time and leisure. You truly are each other's recreational partners. Maybe you met because you used to be runners together. Well, I know you probably can't do that all the time, but okay, what has it transitioned into? Time blocks where you get to show up and experience each other lighthearted and fun, that you have a warm time together, laughter, enjoyment. It's not all about the stresses of life, right? It's not all about navigating business meetings. It's not all about, getting to a place in our arguments where we feel at least settled. But it's on top of that, the cherry on top is where you still have fun together. And that evolves over time. You continue to find those things that bring that connection and laughter. The sexual renewal system. Listen, I can give you all kinds of, it's not the time or the place, but sexual disconnection is so predominant in long-term relationships. And I can't go into the deep dive of how we get here, but when we're not having at least physical intimacy and affection, and especially if it doesn't occasionally work into a place of sexual connection the way that God designed, then the intimacy and time blocks to make it happen reduce, and our want tos don't show up. And I promise, if it's not okay with both parties, then there is going to be some difficulties in the relationship. So there's physiological reasons why it's not happening. There's emotional reasons why it's not happening. A lot of times it's individual, how we show up individually based on our history or our own personal kind of things. Sometimes it's parental stages. There's so many different things that we don't have time to go into, but where are we on this? Right? And then the spiritual one, believing that we were meant to be together, that this entity that we formed, we share with greater meaning and purpose, that we're able to do together something greater than we're able to do individually. That for you Christian couples and faith-based couples, that you truly believe that this entity of the us has all three components of him, her, and God, that bond of all three together in one can create something greater for greater good that we can do together. Some of these people say that they feel like their ministry is their parenting. More power to you. I understand. Raised three my own. Sometimes it's we find closeness in prayer, or we find closeness in the way that we serve together, or we research philanthropy so that we can give either time or treasure, or we show up and we worship together in a house of worship. I don't know how you find it, but do you find it, and does it renew you? So take your time and do your 1 to 5. How are your emotional renewal systems? How are your recreational and leisure renewal systems? How are your sexual renewal systems? And how are your spiritual renewal systems? Take a moment, mark your answers, and then we'll move on. There's no wrong answers. You're not going to be in trouble if you answer honestly from your partner, right, guys? We're going to make this safe and secure, open and honest. We can't fix that which we do not address. We can't identify action steps to those things we haven't been honest about. So give room and space for each person to show up with their perceptual truth without judgment. And here's your last sheet. If you needed more time to do that, please feel free to, after we get done tonight, to go back and take your time, asking more curious questions, figuring out why you had such discrepancy. Maybe you needed some more time to think about it because these are new concepts. I don't know, but feel free to circle back around. But I would say, let's tackle 3 this year. Let's be intentional. I want to intentionally prioritize these 3 areas. And it might not even be the lowest 3, but these are the 3 that are least daunting for you. Or maybe these are the 3 that we didn't get the highest numbers, and so it makes sense to go ahead and address them. Let one person pick one, let one person pick one, and then maybe you decide together on the other. I don't know how you're going to do these action steps because I'm not in your us, but this is just your opportunity to identify them and then identify how you're going to address them. Listen, it has been my experience that these concepts aren't drastically rocket science. I mean, you guys are very intelligent people. You figured out how to register for this workshop. You figured out how to figure out your Zoom call. You've showed up for yourselves. You know, I barely did that. You're not unintelligent people. Sometimes we don't do the things that we know that we need to do just because we either get lazy or we don't want to. So be very careful on what you identify you want your action steps to be. Make sure it's something that you want to do and that you will plan to do. So here are some resources for you. Okay, as I'm back on my screen with you, I can address any questions that you might have. Awesome. Okay, so here's some questions. Is this us ranking or how we feel with our partner or the relationship both ways as we perceive it? Ideally, you can do this is your time just to take some intentionality to look at and assess your relationship. So, however you want to use this resource, please use it the way you see fit. But the way that I kind of think that it could happen is if each of you mark your numbers the way that you see it, your perception of the relationship individually, and then compare answers. So great stuff so far. Will you be sending out this recording? I am listening in my car while driving. Thank you. I'm so glad that you did not take the time to answer your questions while you're driving. Yes, we are recording it because we want you to have it. If you weren't able to get all of the information for some reason, you know, things do happen. We want you to have the replay. It is my gift to you. It is my honor to share this with you. And then some of you who were not able to share, actually show up live have said, can I get the replay? So I'm going to be sending this out. I think this chart is excellent and will definitely share with my partner. Well, good luck. I hope you can explain it. If not, please send the replay link and I can help you explain it. What is an example of an action step on any of these categories? Great question. I haven't really answered those yet. So, I have several different options for you that you might want to consider if they're a possibility. Obviously, I am here to give you any assistance at any level that you might need it. So here are an array of options. I have a podcast. If you haven't seen it or know about it, please go and find it, subscribe to it. If you like it, please like it, share it. It gets the word out. It's called the Love Leading Podcast with Dr. Shanon. You can find it on Spotify and Apple, but it will do a deeper dive in a lot of these categories. I spent all last year walking you through every chapter of my book and or my program. So that's a free resource for you. The Love Leading Podcast. The other thing that I have that is a free resource for you is a deeper dive on your marriage assessment. I don't know who's here. I don't know what your names are. I don't know the answers to any of your questions on this thing. But if you want me to know, if you want to take a more in-depth marriage assessment with results in comparison to other couples and recommendations on what your next steps are, I have a free marriage assessment. We're going to drop that into the chat as well. For you, those of you that might think part of my next action plan really is probably need some oxygen on our, on our face, Shanon. Okay, at what level? My book, it's called Naked and Exposed. It's right here behind me. It is my new way of helping you walk through with deeper understanding at each one of these kinds of concepts. Each one that I went through tonight has a deeper dive in each chapter for you to understand those. If you really think that's going to be helpful, if you're a reader, then that is a good resource for you to have. And there is the link on where you can go on Amazon to order it. Those of you, for some, you're thinking, you know what, this is great, but we need something. Dr. Shanon said, we need some other kinds of intervention. So I have created a Creating Connection video series with curriculum. There's 5 in there for the cost of less than what one counseling session will give you. You will have 5 videos and modules that you can keep permanently and work through. And it's specifically for the hardest part of these, and that is this fight cycle. So it will give you the skills on learning how to map out your unique cycle. It will address how to go about doing the protest and catch, how we navigate out of that disconnect into a connect cycle. And you will have that curriculum and those videos as your own to revisit over and over and over and over again, all for the cost of what's less than one counseling session. And I think Darby put that link in the chat for you. Can you email these resources out to people so I can have one single place to access these? Absolutely. Thank you for asking. It's going to come out with tomorrow with the replay link and those resources for you. Thank you. So for others that are here that you've already been through my 2-day, you've already been through my 2-day intensive or my 2-day intensive with the follow-up program. And you're here to do just your annual checkup that comes with the program. It's free of charge. If you've decided that you probably need on your maintenance program a check-in once a quarter, I have bundled 4 appointments at a discounted rate. So Darby's going to drop that link in for you to go ahead and purchase today so that you will have them throughout the year, however you would like to use them. So 4 sessions bundled for the price of 3. Okay. And then those of you are thinking, well, what's it like to work with you, Dr. Shanon? Oh, I'm so glad that you might ask, because I would love the opportunity to tell you. I offer a free 30-minute consultation for you to sign up to get on the phone with me, share a little bit about uniquely what's going on in your relationship. And you can ask any questions of me and how I work and what these 2-day intensives are, or what the 6-month follow-up program is, or do you work virtually? Yes. Can you work in person if I'm in Tampa? Yes. So I can get on the phone with you, answer any questions that you might have, and be able to uniquely, navigate what your action plan is if you want to consider some kind of counseling intervention. So that 30-minute consult is dropped in the chat right there as well. Did I cover everything there, Darby?
Yeah. I just put the YouTube for your
My YouTube channel.
yeah.
Oh yeah, because not only am I on Spotify and Apple, I have a YouTube channel. And a lot of you have probably begun getting my emails. I have a Marriage Made Whole Facebook group that gives free information as well. But we can go on and on and on, because it's all about getting out the information and getting the intervention at the level that each couple would like it and need it, so that we are all out in the community learning how to love well, being a beacon of light. Because how many times have we been in the room with that couple that you think they figured it out? They have the secret sauce. They somehow know something that I don't know. And we all want it. Because why would we want to go through the majority of our life with just one person of our choosing if we didn't want more than just vanilla? That we want it all. We're designed to have it all. We deserve to have it all. So why wouldn't we just go ahead and put whatever's necessary for our time and attention on the things that matter the most? The foundation of who we are and how we go out. I don't know if you know anything about attachment. It's kind of been in the buzzwords in the community and research and literature today. But listen, there is research, and I'm a firm believer that we become the best versions of ourselves in the context of a deeply intimate, connected, loving relationship. That having a place of respite against the world with one person of our choosing and connection, and being able to be so secure in that relationship that we can go out into the world with the thought of the person being right there with us, that we show up in the best version of ourselves, is no greater joy, hope, love, peace, that those kinds of couples have the ability to move through with resiliency and pleasure like no other. So I hope that you guys give this a gift. You already gave yourself a gift by signing up, showing up. I hope you give yourself the gift to decide that this is the year, 2025, to take a temperature, take a pulse, and to put your action steps into place. Work on it together. I hope that you show up next year to tell me feedback on how well you did, that you can look back over the course of this year and say, whew, look how far we've come. Look how we've moved the bar on how we feel in this relationship with each other. This is just a marker to see how we can move it. I was just working out this morning with a friend, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that it was a year ago today that I started this whole journey of health and fitness. Not that I haven't been a health and fitness person, but listen, I had like 3 things happening last year at this time. I was about to marry off my second child, my oldest son. You know how you feel, ladies, about having those pictures in an album for the rest of your life. You want to look your best, right? I'm going to be turning 60 this year. That was creeping up on me. And then, of course, comes with all those kind of health challenges. So I started this really like deeper dive on health and fitness. And I was kind of patting myself on the back that I showed up to stay true to myself all year long. I couldn't feel better. But I was also looking around the gym thinking, yeah, a week ago, this place was so crazy busy at this time of the day, and we were the only ones in there today. They had already given up on their resolutions. Don't let this be you. Be the ones that celebrate each other because you stuck with whatever action plan this is that you're setting tonight, tomorrow. And maybe you can even set the goal of when we check back in, if we've moved this bar, next year at this time, we're going to celebrate by doing this. Let this be the challenge. So one more question.
It came to me.
Okay, what's the question?
Are there any resources to learn more about attachment theory?
Yeah, so the question is there any more resources to read about attachment theory? My book is all about attachment theory. The Fight Cycle. There will be other reading resources and research that I will talk about in it. So that might be a good resource. Handy dandy Google. What does it look like to have specifically secure attachment in my romantic relationship? Romantic attachment partnership. Let me tell you a little bit more about that because I'm a nerd on this. And since someone asked, I'm going to tell, right? We're born with this need for attachment emotionally because when we have that intimate attachment co-regulation emotionally with our primary caregivers, it develops our emotional brain. Plus, it helps us survive. We have to stay closely connected to our moms and our dads for care, keeping, and comfort, right? So this attachment was God's protection of our development, not only physically, survival, but emotionally, right? When we have love, acceptance, availability, and responsiveness from our parents, we grow into pretty healthy, emotionally mature adults. But what we're finding in the last few decades is that our need for that attachment connection with our primary caregivers obviously individuates. We detach from them. But that doesn't mean we don't need attachment anymore. It just means that it transfers to our romantic partners. So it is that thing that leaves and cleaves, and it has the same purpose. We still need to reach for someone for care, keeping, and comfort. And there has to be an attachment into that intimate bond for emotional co-regulation. It looks a little different because it's not necessarily just one-sided. Now it's two people needing to reach for each other. But it's God's protection of the care and keeping of this one flesh. It's a really fascinating system. Would love to do more information on that. If you want some more information on that, I could talk about it for hours. I spent my whole PhD researching it. It is fascinating because I believe that God shows up and reveals himself not only in his spoken word, which is science creation, but also his written word, scripture, and they don't contradict. You'll really enjoy more information about that in my book. I hope that answers your question. My extra bonus share tonight. Any more questions before we let you go? All right, guys, it's been my joy. It's been my pleasure. If you are still interested in more of these free webinars, I have several coming up in the year to come. I go a deeper dive in my conflict connection webinar. I do a deeper dive in my intimacy for life method using these renewal systems for connection. So you'll want to look out for those. You'll find them on my website when they're announced. If you're on my email newsletter list, you will get more of my newsletters each week, and I'll be announcing the things to come. Keep an ear out on the podcast. They'll be announced there as well. It's been my pleasure. You guys have a good night.